All right, welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. So, you know how this works. We take some interesting sources, really get into them, and we'll pull out the gems for you guys, the stuff that really matters without weighing you down with too much info. And today, we're going to dive into a classic. Yeah, I'm talking A Technique for Getting Ideas by James Webb Young. Now, this guy, he wasn't some professor stuck in an ivory tower. He was right in the thick of it in the advertising world. I mean, he was coming up with ideas that actually sold. And this book, it's not some dry academic paper either. It started as like a talk he gave to advertising students and people in the industry. So it's pretty approachable and straight to the point.
Right, and it's fascinating how he actually got started on this whole line of thinking. He talks about a chat he had with this magazine ad manager who, after really analyzing what made sales kick, figured out that the real key was selling ideas, not just ad space.
Yeah.
And so this manager, he throws this seemingly simple question at Young. How do you actually come up with them? And for someone whose whole career revolved around generating these ideas, I mean, that question, after the initial what moment, it really got him thinking, on a deeper level.
For sure. And Young, realizing the weight of that question, he really went deep. His main argument, and he puts it out there with real conviction, is that coming up with ideas, it isn't some random, unpredictable thing. Like, it's not magic, right? It's actually a very specific process, a technique that you can actually learn and control, like an assembly line almost. He even calls it a formula at one point, but quickly adds that, sure, the steps might sound easy, but the real effort is in the mental work, the thinking involved. So what this means for you is that, coming up with those awesome ideas, it's not about waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about actually understanding and using a specific method.
Exactly. He challenges this whole idea that creativity is only for those born with, like, a special gift. He does mention Pareto's idea of speculators, people who just naturally gravitate towards finding new combinations. But Young's perspective is actually super encouraging. If you're drawn to something like advertising, he suggests, you probably already have some creative potential in you. And
Yeah.
like any skill, you can hone it and make it sharper by understanding the right principles and using effective methods.
Right, let's get into those principles then. Young lays out two fundamental concepts. The first one, and he really emphasizes this, is that at its core, an idea is just a new combination of things that already exist. It's not about making something from nothing, it's about taking what you've got and connecting it in a way that's fresh and unexpected. So if you're stuck on something, this is a great starting point. Don't try to invent something totally new. Look at the pieces you already have and think about how you can mix them up, rearrange them, connect them in a way that's surprising.
And the second principle, it actually builds directly on that first one. Young says that your ability to come up with these new combinations, it really hinges on how well you can see relationships between bits of information that seem completely unrelated. He points out that this is a big difference between people who are good at generating ideas and those who aren't. Some folks just see facts in isolation, while others, they naturally see the connections, the patterns that reveal these broader principles.
He explains this really well by comparing those who just see isolated facts to those who see, the links between them, revealing these bigger trends and patterns. He even brings up this fascinating example that connects advertising and, get this, psychiatry. What's the main link there as he saw it?
So he points out that psychiatrists, they understand this profound impact of words as symbols that evoke emotions. Certain words trigger specific feelings and experiences. And then he mentions Dr. Harold Laswell's work, which takes this understanding even further, applying it to political action and propaganda, showing how, carefully chosen words can influence how people behave in groups. So this suggests a really powerful link between understanding the psychology of language and using it in communication that aims to persuade.
Which leads to some pretty interesting questions for you, right, when it comes to advertising. Like, could changing just one word in a headline, could that drastically change how people react? Should those in advertising be studying the emotional weight of words as much as, traditional rhetoric? And what are those key emotional word symbols that could really pack a punch?
Exactly. Seeing these underlying relationships, it allows you to identify the general principles at work. And once you understand those bigger principles, they kind of naturally lead you to new applications, new combinations, which is where where fresh ideas come from. It's about going beyond the surface and really getting to grips with those fundamental forces that are driving things.
So it's not just about taking in information passively, it's about actively looking for those hidden connections, those threads that link seemingly random things together. Young actually calls it cultivating a habit of mind that's always looking for those connections. How can our listeners, how can they develop this habit in their own thinking?
Well, he actually makes a suggestion that might surprise you, especially for those in advertising or any field that needs creative solutions. He says, get into the social sciences, dive into them. He specifically mentions Theory of the Leisure Class by Thorstein Veblen. Now, on the surface, a book about the habits of rich people in the late 19th century. It might seem totally irrelevant to selling stuff today, right?
Yeah.
But Young argues that it provides really valuable insights into human behavior, motivations, and the dynamics of society. And those are the very things that drive what consumers choose. So for you, broadening your understanding of sociology, psychology, anthropology, that can give you a much deeper understanding of your target audience.
It's a powerful reminder that your potential sources for ideas, they're not limited to things directly related to your field. It's that wider understanding of how people think, how they act, how they interact with the world that truly fuels creative thinking.
Okay, so we've gone over those two fundamental principles. Now let's see how Young takes these and turns them into a practical approach, something you can actually use with his 5-step technique for coming up with ideas. And he's very clear that these steps, you got to follow them in order.
Yeah, the order matters. He emphasizes that. Each step builds on the one before it, so it creates this structured process for generating ideas. The first step, not surprisingly, is gathering your raw materials. But Young stresses that this is way more than just a simple search for information. It's a lot more deliberate and thorough. Right. It's not just skimming the surface. He makes a distinction between uh, specific and general materials. So the specific materials, those relate directly to the problem you're tackling. In
Uh-huh.
advertising, that would be like a deep dive into the product itself and really understanding your target audience. And when he says understanding, he means going way beyond just basic demographics. He stresses that you need intimate knowledge. So for you, if you're facing a challenge, that means really immersing yourself in all the nitty-gritty details of the problem and, who you're trying to reach.
He uses this brilliant analogy, actually. He talks about de Maupassant's advice to a writer. He said, instead of just looking at, a cab driver in general, you got to study that individual cab driver so closely that you can describe what makes them unique, what sets them apart from every other cab driver out there. And that same level of deep, nuanced observation and understanding, that's what's needed for your product and your audience. What are their little needs, the ones they might even say out loud? What are those unspoken desires they have?
He even gives this great example from the real world about a pretty ordinary bar of soap. By really studying how it interacted with skin and hair, like, the basic purpose of the soap, someone managed to come up with 5 years worth of super successful advertising ideas, and that resulted in a tenfold increase in sales. So you see, even the most everyday, mundane things can be a gold mine of ideas if you just look at them closely enough.
And for organizing all this specific information, Young recommends this method that might seem kind of old school, the card index method. It might seem a bit outdated in our digital world, but he argues that physically writing down each piece of information on a separate card and then sorting them into categories, it forces you to engage with the material on a deeper level. It's not just about storage. It's about actively processing the information and getting your mind ready to make those connections.
And then we move on to gathering general materials. This is where your curiosity, that broad interest in things, really becomes an asset. Young noticed that all the truly creative people he met, they all had this insatiable curiosity about all sorts of stuff, from ancient history to modern art. They were always reading, always exploring different fields. So for you, don't dismiss those interests that seem unrelated to your work. They're essential fuel for your creative engine.
He uses this memorable analogy, browsing, no milk. Just like a cow needs to graze over a large area to produce milk, your mind needs a constant influx of different information to generate ideas. Remember, we talked about how ideas are basically new combinations. So in your work, this means mixing your specific knowledge with this broader understanding of life, culture, and what's going on in the world. It's like cross-pollinating your mind.
It's like a kaleidoscope, right? The more diverse and colorful bits of glass you have inside, representing all the different aspects of general knowledge in your mind, the more potential there is for those new striking patterns, those ideas, to appear when you give it a shake. This really changes how we think about the practical value of, those seemingly unrelated college courses or hobbies you might have. And Young suggests keeping scrapbooks or files for these general materials, kind of like Sherlock Holmes and his meticulous system of notes and clippings. He even tells a story about how he just randomly jotted down a question about firstborn sons always being male, and later on that became a successful headline. Who knew, right?
So step one, it's all about filling your mental landscape with a rich variety of information, some directly relevant to the task at hand, some just broadly enriching your understanding of the world. Now that you've gathered all these different ingredients, what happens in step two of Jung's technique?
Step two, he calls it, and I love this, the mental digestive process. This is where you really start actively working with all that material you gathered, but it happens inside your head. It's a more internal process, less outwardly visible. He describes it as feeling the facts, turning them over and over in your mind, looking at them from different angles, and actively searching for meaning and those crucial connections, the underlying relationships. For you, this means going beyond just knowing the information to really understanding its implications and potential connections.
He makes this key point that sometimes the meaning, it doesn't just pop up when you're directly searching for it. It's almost like you have to kind of listen for it rather than actively
Yeah.
looking. This is often when creative people might seem a bit lost in thought, absent-minded. Their minds are deeply engaged in this internal processing.
Yeah, and he recommends writing down any little sparks of ideas that come up during this stage, no matter how incomplete or strange they might seem. Getting them out of your head and onto paper, it helps to kind of externalize the internal process and move things along. He also says it's important to push through that initial mental fatigue, that feeling of, ugh, my brain is fried. You got to push through that to reach what he calls the second wind of thinking, a deeper level. And this stage eventually ends in what he calls the hopeless stage, where your thoughts feel all jumbled and no clear insight seems to be coming. But according to Jung, reaching this point after really wrestling with the material, that's a sign that step two is complete.
So you've diligently collected your raw materials, you mentally wrestled with them, and now you're at this point of like mental clutter. What's the next crucial step that helps bring clarity?
Step three is all about incubation. This is where you step back from the problem on purpose. You consciously put it out of your mind as much as you can. But Jung emphasizes this isn't just passively waiting around. It's as important and deliberate as gathering the information in the first place. For you, this means actively choosing to focus on something completely different to let your subconscious mind do its work.
It's about handing the problem over to your unconscious to keep processing it while your conscious mind is busy with other things. He even uses this interesting example of Sherlock Holmes, who would often go to concerts while in the middle of a complex case. What might seem like a distraction to a logical mind is actually a clever way to disengage the conscious analytical part of the brain and let the subconscious make those unexpected connections.
He suggests doing things that stimulate your emotions, like listening to music, going to the theater, watching movies, reading an engaging book, even a good detective novel. He sees it as part of the digestion process. You've taken in the initial ingredients, you've processed them, and now you need those gastric juices, your emotions, and your subconscious activity to help with the deeper synthesis. So actively seek out experiences that evoke emotion during this incubation period.
So you create mental space, you immerse yourself in something different, and you trust that your unconscious is still working on the challenge in the background. What's the reward for this period of mental disengagement?
That brings us to step four. The birth of the idea. This is that aha moment, that flash of insight. Jung describes it as the idea just appearing seemingly out of thin air, often when you least expect it, like while you're shaving, taking a shower, or, that classic image waking up in the morning. So be open to these sudden inspirations, even if they come at the most inconvenient times.
He shares some really compelling anecdotes from Mary Roberts Reinhardt and Mr. Ives, the guy who invented the halftone printing process. Both of them talk about these sudden bursts of clarity after intentionally stepping away from the problem. It really highlights that while focused effort lays the groundwork, the actual breakthrough often happens when you're not actively trying to force it. It's like the unconscious mind needs that space to connect the dots in new and surprising ways.
Absolutely. You know that famous image of Isaac Newton supposedly discovering gravity by constantly thinking about it? Well, Jung suspects that the real aha moment probably happened when he was relaxing, maybe taking a walk in nature, when his mind wasn't directly focused on the problem.
So the idea suddenly appears, maybe feeling complete and brilliant. Is that the last stage in Jung's technique?
Not quite. There's still step 5, which he calls, quite pragmatically, the cold, gray dawn of the morning after. This is where you take that shiny new idea and you test it against the realities of the world. And often you'll find that it needs some tweaking. It might not be as perfect as it seemed in that initial flash of inspiration. For you, this is the crucial stage of evaluation.
He stresses the importance of patiently refining your idea and adapting it to the constraints of reality. This is where a lot of promising ideas fail if the person who came up with them isn't willing to put in the extra work of testing and adjusting. He warns against getting too attached to your initial vision and really encourages you to seek constructive criticism from people you trust and whose judgment you value.
And he points out something really interesting and encouraging. Good ideas often have this self-expanding quality. When you share them with others, they can contribute their own perspectives, see possibilities you might have missed, and ultimately help make the idea even better. So don't be afraid to share your early ideas and invite feedback.
So, to recap Young's five-step technique, it starts with diligently gathering a wide range of raw materials, both specific to your challenge and just generally enriching. Then comes the mental digestive process, where you actively engage with this information and look for connections. Then the crucial incubation stage, where you step back intentionally to let your unconscious mind work its magic. This often leads to the sudden birth of the idea. And finally, you test, refine, and adapt the idea to the real world.
And Young goes on to emphasize the importance of having this extensive base of general knowledge. He shares a personal experience of moving to New Mexico and how his genuine interest in the local culture, the traditions of the Native Americans, the history of the Spanish settlers, the unique crafts they had there, it didn't just enrich his life, it actually sparked a new business venture for him and all the specific advertising ideas that went with it. He really emphasizes that those practical advertising ideas, they came directly from that general knowledge he gained simply out of interest. This shows you that what might seem like unrelated learning can have surprising and beneficial practical applications.
What's particularly insightful is how he connects this to the idea that certain types of advertising, or even certain types of creative solutions in any field, you just can't effectively create them until you've had certain life experiences or you've cultivated a broader understanding of the world. He even talks about the importance of vicarious experience, learning through reading, observation, and genuine curiosity about things you haven't directly encountered.
He uses this example of an author who'd never been to South America but wrote a really compelling and believable adventure novel set there. But he makes it clear that this kind of vicarious experience, it's most valuable when it comes from genuine interest, not just from wanting a specific outcome. It's about having a broad and open mind.
And he brings it back to the practical world of advertising with this sharp example about understanding social dynamics. He says that if you don't have a deeper understanding of, say, the early 19th century English gentry's strong dislike for people involved in trade, you might struggle to create really effective snob appeal advertisements. It highlights the idea that your general knowledge gives you that nuanced understanding of human motivations and social contexts, which is necessary for effective communication and coming up with ideas.
And he ends with this really thought-provoking idea that words themselves are like ideas in a state of suspended animation. By truly understanding and mastering words, you're basically reactivating those underlying concepts and unlocking their potential. He mentions semantics as a key area. Even if you never use the word semantics directly in your work, having a deep understanding of how meaning is conveyed through language gives you a powerful set of symbols and tools. This suggests that paying close attention to language itself can be a rich source of inspiration.
It's such a beautiful way to think about the power of language. He concludes by saying that you can think of a dictionary as this huge collection of short stories, each word containing a wealth of potential ideas just waiting to be rediscovered and reconnected.
So for you, our listener, take a moment to think about how you currently approach gathering and processing information. Are you consciously using any of these 5 steps in your own problem-solving or creative processes? What areas of general knowledge might you be overlooking? Areas you could explore just out of pure curiosity without any specific goal in mind? And what unexpected and innovative ideas might come from making those connections? It's all about nurturing that rich inner landscape and trusting the process to bring those surprising combinations to light.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We hope this has sparked some ideas and maybe even inspired you to go out and do some browsing of your own.
See you next time, folks, when we'll be tackling another fascinating topic.